I was 24 years old and part of a recreational caving group in Kentucky. We weren't professionals, but we had years of experience. Enough experience to understand basic cave safety. Enough experience to know when something wasn't right. The trip involved 4 people. Myself, my friend Derek, a guy named Mark, and another experienced explorer named Chris. The cave system itself stretched for miles beneath heavily wooded land. Unlike commercial caves, there were no lights, no railings, no guides, nothing, just darkness. We entered around 9 a.m. The first few hours went perfectly. Large chambers, underground streams, narrow crawl spaces. Everything felt normal. Exactly the kind of trip we'd planned. Around noon, we discovered the first strange thing. A water bottle. Not unusual by itself. People litter. People forget equipment. It happens. The problem was the condition. The bottle looked new. Very new. No dust. No dirt. No signs of age. Somebody had been there recently. The discovery didn't concern us much. At least initially. Then we found a second one. And a third. Then food wrappers. Then batteries. Then a flashlight. Each item looked relatively fresh. The deeper we traveled, the more evidence appeared. Eventually Derek joked that somebody practically lived down there. Nobody laughed, because by then we were all thinking the same thing. Someone might. Several hours later, we entered a massive chamber. One of the largest spaces I'd ever seen underground. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. The chamber felt enormous. Silent. Ancient. That's when we heard the footsteps. A single step. Then another. Then silence. Every flashlight turned immediately. Nothing. The chamber remained empty. At first, we assumed rocks were falling somewhere deeper inside the cave. A reasonable explanation. Until it happened again. Step. Step. Silence. The sound felt unmistakably human. Still, nobody said it aloud. Nobody wanted to. We continued exploring. The footsteps returned roughly 15 minutes later. This time from behind us. And that's when things became difficult to ignore. Because every time our group stopped, the footsteps stopped too. Every single time. The pattern repeated for nearly an hour. Walk. Footsteps. Stop. Silence. Walk again. Footsteps. Silence. My stomach tightened more with every repetition. Eventually Chris called out. No response. Only silence. Then several minutes later, more footsteps. The atmosphere changed immediately. Nobody joked anymore. Nobody wandered ahead. Nobody separated from the group. Everyone stayed close together. The deeper we traveled, the worse the feeling became. Then we found the campsite, hidden inside a side chamber. The site stopped all of us. A sleeping bag, water containers, food supplies, candles, blankets, everything carefully organized. Not abandoned. Used. Recently used. My heart immediately started racing. Because now we knew somebody had been spending significant time underground. And there was a very good chance they were still there. We debated leaving. Honestly, we should have. Instead, curiosity won. We pushed deeper. About 40 minutes later, we discovered something that finally convinced us to turn around. A lantern. Burning. Fresh flame. Nobody had seen it earlier. Nobody in our group owned it, which meant somebody had placed it there recently. Very recently. Possibly while we were nearby. The realization terrified all of us. The trip ended immediately. No discussion. No debate. Just leave. We started moving back toward the entrance. And that's when the footsteps returned. Closer. Much closer. For the first time, they sounded like actual movement rather than distant echoes. Step. 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 Always behind us. Never visible. Never identifiable. Just present. The journey back felt endless. Every tunnel looked threatening. Every shadow looked human. Every sound felt amplified. Then something happened that genuinely frightened me. Mark suddenly stopped, pointed his flashlight toward a narrow side passage, and whispered, "Did you see that?" Nobody answered, because we'd all seen it. A light. Brief. Gone almost immediately. Like somebody had turned a flashlight off the moment they realized we'd noticed. My blood ran cold, because now we had confirmation. We weren't alone. Not even close. The remaining hike out became a race. Nobody ran. Running underground is dangerous. But we moved as fast as possible. Eventually daylight appeared. Then fresh air. Then freedom. The relief felt overwhelming. Several days later, local authorities were informed. Searches were conducted. Investigations followed. Eventually, evidence suggested somebody had indeed been living inside portions of the cave system. Who? Nobody knew. How long? Nobody knew. The campsites remained. The supplies remained. But the individual responsible was never located. Years later, one detail still bothers me. The footsteps. Because caves create strange echoes. That's true. But echoes don't stop every time you stop. And they definitely don't follow you for 3 miles. The map shouldn't have existed. That's what scared me. Not the fact that we found it. The fact that somebody had updated it. Because the route marked on that map included passages that weren't officially documented. Passages we'd only discovered a few hours earlier. And somehow, someone had already drawn them. This happened in 2022. I was part of a small exploration group documenting lesser-known cave systems in southern Missouri. We weren't professionals, but we worked closely with local landowners and caving organizations. Most trips involved mapping side passages and recording geological features. Nothing particularly exciting, at least most of the time. There were 3 of us. Me, my friend Lucas, and another experienced explorer named Ryan. The cave we entered that weekend wasn't famous. It wasn't on tourist maps. Very few people knew it existed. According to local records, only a handful of explorers had entered it within the previous decade. That isolation was exactly why we chose it. We entered shortly after sunrise. The first several hours went smoothly. The cave system was larger than expected. Far larger. Multiple chambers branched in different directions. Several narrow passages connected major sections. It quickly became obvious that existing maps were incomplete. That wasn't unusual. Many cave systems remain poorly documented. We were excited. Finding unexplored areas is part of the appeal. Around noon, we discovered a narrow opening behind a collapsed section of rock. The passage wasn't marked on any of our maps. Not one. The opening required crawling. Tight enough that moving through it took several minutes. Once inside, however, the tunnel expanded dramatically. A huge chamber stretched beyond. Untouched. Beautiful. Completely absent from existing documentation. Or so we thought. For the next 2 hours, we explored. Measured. Photographed. Mapped. Everything felt incredible. Then we found the backpack. The pack sat against a wall deep inside the newly discovered chamber. At first glance, it looked abandoned. Then Lucas noticed something. No dust. None. The backpack appeared relatively clean, as though somebody had placed it there recently. My stomach tightened immediately, because reaching that chamber required crawling through a difficult passage. The odds of someone recently visiting seemed low. Still, not impossible. Curiosity got the better of us. Inside the backpack we found water bottles, batteries, a flashlight, and a notebook. The notebook changed everything. Inside were sketches, measurements, maps, detailed maps, including the chamber we'd just discovered. My heart immediately started pounding, because that wasn't possible. We had only found the chamber a few hours earlier. Yet somebody had already mapped it, extensively. The notebook contained far more than basic sketches. It showed side passages, elevation changes, landmarks, details we'd barely begun documenting ourselves. Whoever created it knew the cave extremely well, much better than we did. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Excitement disappeared. Something felt wrong. Then Ryan found another page, a route map, highlighted in red. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then realization hit me. The red line matched our exact route through the cave. Every turn, every chamber, every side passage, everything, including the newly discovered crawl space. My blood ran cold, because that meant one of 2 things. Either the map was impossibly accurate by coincidence, or somebody had been watching us. Neither explanation felt good. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Lucas pointed toward the bottom corner of the page. There was a date. Today's date. The notebook had been updated that day. That realization hit like a punch to the stomach. Someone had been inside the cave recently. Very recently. Possibly right now. We decided to leave immediately. No arguments. No debate. Just leave. The return journey began smoothly. Then strange things started happening. Small things. Subtle things. First we noticed one of our reflective trail markers missing. Then another. Then another. The markers hadn't fallen. They'd vanished. The pattern felt disturbingly familiar, as if somebody was intentionally removing them after we'd passed. The deeper realization arrived slowly. Someone might not just be in the cave. Someone might be behind us, following, watching, waiting. Around 3 hours into our exit, we reached a large chamber we'd crossed earlier. That's where we heard the whistle. 3 short notes, echoing through the darkness. The sound immediately froze everyone. No one in our group was whistling. No one nearby should have been there. Yet the whistle came again. Closer. 3 notes. Silence. Then another. Even closer. At that point, panic started creeping in. Nobody ran. Running underground is dangerous. But our pace increased dramatically. The whistle followed. Not continuously. Every few minutes. Always behind us. Always distant. Always impossible to locate. The experience felt surreal, like being hunted. Eventually we reached the crawl space connecting the unknown chamber to the main cave system. Relief flooded through me, then disappeared immediately, because something sat beside the opening. A flashlight, turned on, pointed directly at the crawl space. The flashlight didn't belong to us, and it definitely hadn't been there earlier. My stomach dropped, because somebody had placed it there, recently, possibly minutes earlier, possibly while we'd been approaching. The message felt obvious. Someone knew where we were, and wanted us to know it. We didn't stop. We crawled through the opening as quickly as possible. The remaining journey felt endless. Every shadow looked human. Every echo sounded like movement. Every sound increased the tension. Finally, after nearly 10 hours underground, we saw daylight. I've never felt relief like that. Not before. Not since. Authorities were informed afterward. Local caving organizations investigated. Several follow-up searches occurred. The backpack remained. The notebook remained. The maps remained. But nobody ever found the person responsible. At least not officially. Years later, one detail still bothers me, because investigators examined the notebook carefully. The route map showed our path. That's true, but it also showed something else. A second path, drawn in blue, following ours, from a distance, the entire day. The first time I heard the voice, I thought it was one of my friends. The second time, I knew it wasn't. By the third time, I stopped answering, because whatever was speaking knew my name, and it was calling to me from somewhere deep inside the cave. Somewhere nobody should have been. This happened in October of 2021. I was part of a 4-person exploration group investigating a remote cave system in eastern Tennessee. The cave wasn't famous. It wasn't a tourist destination. In fact, most people living nearby didn't even know it existed. The entrance sat hidden behind dense forest on private land owned by a family friend. Very few people had ever explored it, at least officially. There were 4 of us. Me, my friend Brandon, a guy named Kyle, and our most experienced member, Ryan. We'd explored together before. Everyone trusted each other. Everyone knew proper cave procedures. Nothing about the trip felt unusual. At first, we entered around 8 a.m. The first several hours went perfectly. The cave was enormous. Huge chambers, underground streams, passages branching in every direction. Exactly the kind of place experienced explorers love. By noon we'd already mapped several sections that weren't included in existing records. The trip felt productive, exciting, successful. Then Ryan found the helmet. The helmet sat beside a rock wall deep inside the cave. White, dust-covered, old. At first we assumed another explorer had left it years ago. Then Brandon noticed something strange. The headlamp attached to the helmet still worked. Not perfectly, but it worked. That detail immediately changed the mood, because batteries don't survive underground forever. Someone had used that helmet relatively recently. Still, we continued. About an hour later, we entered a narrow passage requiring single-file movement. The tunnel stretched nearly 300 feet before opening into another chamber. Ryan went first. I followed, then Brandon, then Kyle. Everything felt normal, until Ryan disappeared. Not permanently, not dramatically, just suddenly. One moment his light remained visible. The next moment it vanished. I remember calling his name. No response. Then several seconds later his voice echoed back. "I'm fine." The answer sounded distant, farther away than it should have. But nothing else seemed wrong, so we kept moving. Eventually we reached the chamber. Ryan stood near the far wall. Everything appeared normal. Still, something felt off. He looked uneasy. When I asked what happened, he hesitated, then shrugged. "Thought I heard someone talking." The comment immediately made everyone pause. Talking? Inside a remote cave? The idea seemed ridiculous. We were miles from the entrance. Nobody should have been nearby. Eventually we laughed it off. Echoes, water, imagination, anything but another person. Then I heard it, about 30 minutes later. A voice, faint, almost impossible to understand, coming from somewhere deeper inside the cave. I stopped immediately. So did everyone else. The voice disappeared. Nobody said anything for several seconds. Then Brandon asked, "Did you hear that?" My stomach tightened, because now I knew it wasn't imagination. We all heard it. The sound never repeated, at least not immediately. The trip continued. Then around 4 p.m. we reached the deepest point of our planned route. A massive chamber extending beyond our flashlight beams. The space felt enormous, silent, oppressive, and that's where things became truly terrifying. Kyle wandered roughly 50 feet away to photograph rock formations. Nothing unusual. Then his light disappeared. Not turned off. Gone. Like someone had stepped between us. My heart immediately started racing. We called his name. No response. Again. Nothing. For nearly 30 seconds, Kyle was completely silent. Then his flashlight reappeared. And his voice echoed back. "I'm here." Relief flooded through me. Until he returned. Because Kyle looked genuinely shaken. The first thing he said was, "Someone called my name." Nobody laughed. Nobody joked. Nobody questioned him. Because the expression on his face said everything. He believed it. Completely. According to Kyle, he'd heard a voice behind him. A male voice. Quiet. Calm. Calling his name. The problem? All of us had been in front of him. Nobody stood behind him. The atmosphere changed immediately. The trip was over. No discussion. No debate. We were leaving. The return journey started smoothly. Then the voice came back. This time I heard it clearly. "Eric." My name. Whispered. Somewhere behind me. Every hair on my body stood up. Because there was no mistaking it. No misunderstanding. No echo. No confusion. Someone had said my name. I spun around instantly. Darkness. Nothing else. The voice never repeated. At least not for a while. Then Brandon heard it. Then Ryan. Each of us separately. Each of us hearing our own names. Always from behind. Always from somewhere deeper inside the cave. The experience felt impossible, terrifying, and completely unexplainable. The remaining hours became a blur of anxiety and adrenaline. Then we discovered the campsite, hidden inside a side chamber. The site stopped all of us. Sleeping bags, food, lanterns, water containers. Not abandoned. Occupied. Recently occupied. My stomach dropped immediately, because now there was proof. Someone had been living underground, possibly for months, possibly longer, and judging by the condition of the supplies, they might still be there. The realization pushed everyone into survival mode. We left immediately. No photographs, no investigation, no curiosity. Just leave. The final hour felt endless. Every sound seemed threatening. Every shadow seemed human. Every echo felt deliberate. Then we finally saw daylight. The relief was overwhelming. I thought the story ended there. It didn't. Several weeks later, local authorities investigated portions of the cave. They located multiple campsites, stored supplies, evidence of long-term occupation. Everything suggested someone had indeed been spending extended periods underground. The individual was never identified, at least not officially. Years later, one detail still bothers me. Because during the investigation, authorities recovered notebooks. Dozens of notebooks. Most contained maps, schedules, observations. Normal enough. Then investigators found a page listing names. Names of explorers who had visited the cave, including ours. Every member of our group. Written weeks before our trip. My name included. And beneath it sat a sentence investigators later showed me. A sentence I wish I'd never read. It said, "He answers when you use his name." To this day, I don't know who wrote it. And honestly, I don't want to. because hearing a voice in a cave is frightening. Learning someone already knew your name before you arrived, that's much worse.